Welcome to the Infernal Brotherhood of the scruffy-looking nerf herders. Today is a live streaming Star Wars playthrough run by Star Wars fans for Star Wars. I can't talk. For Star Wars fans. Today we are in our second part of the playthrough of West End Games' Star Wars Solitaire adventure starring Han Solo called Scoundrel's Luck. So we left off on number 82. Let's see where this story continues. I think this should be like the end, right? I guess we'll find out. If nervous people felt butterflies in their stomachs, Han is feeling bats. The walker has appeared out of nowhere, like a void spider in pursuit of warm blood. But the walker is more dangerous. "Shields forward!" Han yells. Chewbacca has anticipated his command. He punches a button, and the Falcon's full shield complement is angled forward. The walker fires again. 2 red energy bolts explode in front of the cockpit. The shields reflect the concussion back at the mammoth vehicle, rocking it badly. Before the Imperial gun crew regains its bearings, Han turns the Falcon away and accelerates out of range. Chewbacca snaps an angry comment. The belly gun well-damaged indicator flashes on and off. "I've been working just as hard," Han responds. "Don't blame me." He pulls the Falcon into a steep climb. "What about him?" Han says, jerking his thumb towards Sodara. "He's the one they want." "Okay, so picking him up was my idea, but you can bet Leia isn't paying for this trip." They exit the atmosphere. When they pass Montori's rings, Han breathes a sigh of relief. The Eradicator is nowhere in sight. As the nav computer calculates the hyperspace course, the 2 smugglers let Lieutenant Birdlow monitor the cockpit while they inspect the damage to the belly. They have suffered a few loose connections, but nothing crippling. Chewbacca can repair the damage in flight. Han returns to the cockpit and takes the Falcon into hyperspace. Turn to section 117. 117. Is this? Oh, geez. Han and Chewbacca have been watching the Doppler-shifted streaks of starlight for 3 hours. They are in the last period of hyperspace before the next jump. The smugglers have nothing to do except watch the ship fly itself. Although the Falcon needs some maintenance, they feel uncomfortable working with so many eyes about. Besides, they have repaired the worst of the recent damage. Captain Sodara and the stormtroopers are polite, but Han senses that he has nothing in common with the Imperial deserters. The troopers spend their time sharpening their martial disciplines or discussing what they will do after selling the cloaking device. He would not tell them as much, but Han suspects they will spend the rest of their lives dodging Imperial bounty hunters. "I can't figure Leia," the Corellian says. He wants to talk, and Leia is the only subject he and Chewbacca have not talked to death. "Just when I think she's a regular human being, she gets huffy and starts acting like a princess. Does she like us or not?" Chewie grunts a response. "It doesn't matter," Han repeats. "That's easy for the Wookiee to say. You don't understand humans." Chewbacca is not in a talkative mood, but Han can restrain himself for only 5 minutes. "Maybe she just doesn't like Wookiees." The co-pilot snarls an indignant question. "Lots of people don't like Wookiees," Han says. "It's nothing personal." "What makes you think it's me she doesn't like? She probably got herself kidnapped, so I'd rescue her." Chewbacca growls, then falls silent. Something clicks in Han's mind. He stares out the viewport, barely aware of the emptiness he watches. An hour later, he says, "I know who Elfreda Goot is. She's Leia." The look Chewie gives Han says he's crazy. "Who's ever heard of Elfreda Goot? How would she have found us on Ord Mantell? Who but Leia would challenge me to a race? This crazy race is Leia's way of trying to prove she's as good as I am." Chewbacca shakes his head and returns to staring out the forward viewport. 10 hours later, everyone aboard the Falcon is happy to drop to sublight speeds. The beauty of the Aldo-Spatian comet is legendary. Trapped between 2 stars of an otherwise unremarkable binary system, the comet is so spectacular that men risk death for a close look. Any pilot wishing to pass close has to fly a tightrope between its 2 stars. Overcompensating to escape one star's gravitational attraction often means plunging into the other. Han rechecks the course plotted by the nav computer. The quickest route to Tatooine runs right between the stars, through the comet's coma, a gaseous sphere 100,000 kilometers across. Buried somewhere inside the coma is a 10-kilometer chunk of dirty ice rock and metal which they'll probably not see until they hit it. Han briefly considers flying around the entire system, but Leia, or Alfreda, will no doubt risk the shortcut. Han does not intend to be outdone by a woman, whatever her name. The comet currently hangs almost exactly between Aldo and Spotch. Even from a distance of several tens of millions of kilometers, each star is the size of the Falcon and shines in an intensity that would dim a turbolaser blast by comparison. Most comets have two tails, a straight one with a fiery appearance and a glowing, slightly curved one. The Aldo-Spotchian comet has four tails, two straight and two curved. The straight, fiery trails shoot 250,000 kilometers in opposite directions from the coma. They end in stubby, mushroom-like caps. The straight tails are created when the solar wind passes through the coma and drags away certain ionized gases. Because the Aldo-Spotchian comet has two stars, it has two tails of ionized gases. The Corellian guesses that the unusual stubby tail caps are created when the solar wind of the opposite star forces the tail to curl back on itself. The glowing, curved tails sweep away from the coma almost in opposite directions. They consist of dust particles so fine that the touch of starlight knocks them into space. Perhaps 500,000 kilometers from the coma, each tail turns back in a great arc and tapers to a narrow point that ends abreast of the coma. "Now that I've seen such beauty, I would happily die," Sodara comments. "You just may," Han says. He shifts his attention to plotting the safest route between the two stars. What he sees on the flight computer's vid screen concerns him more than the danger posed by the twin suns. A large wedge has appeared only 85,000 kilometers behind the Falcon. Two smaller silhouettes have separated from the large one. It can only be a Star Destroyer dispatching TIE fighters. "They followed us!" Han yells. "How'd they do that?" Sodara looks over the pilot's shoulder at the flight computer and curses. Then he points to the transmission actuation switch. It's in the on position again. "I told you to fix that!" Han yells at Chewbacca. "Do I have to do everything myself?" For a moment, the Wookiee looks as if he will tear Han limb from limb. His face quickly sags into depression, however, and he moans an apology. "At least the Eradicator's not coming after us," Han says. "Yet." "It will not," Sodara promises. "Velen will not risk his prize so close to the gravity wells of a double star, but I'm certain those are his best pilots." The Corellian accelerates. The TIE fighters are much faster than his vessel, but he can lure them into the comet, away from the reinforcements. The Falcon stands a good chance of winning the battle. As the freighter enters the comet's hazy dust tail, Sodara assigns 2 men to operate the gunwales. The 2 TIEs enter just behind the Falcon. Although the tail is not dense, its dust particles emit a brilliant, ghostly light. The ambient glare impairs Han's vision as badly as a darkroom would have. It's like flying inside an immense illumination tube. TIE energy bursts flash past the Falcon every half second. Each bolt quickly dissipates, leaving a red streak of fluorescing dust in its wake. Han pays the spurts of light no attention. The tricky gravity wells of Aldo and Spock keep him too busy to worry about pot shots. The freighter bucks and gyrates wildly as Han fights to walk the tightrope between the 2 stars. "Hold your fire," Captain Sodara orders his men, "until we reach a stable gravity plateau. You're only wasting energy." A few moments later, the Falcon reaches the coma. Like the dust tail, it's a mass of glowing particles, except it's much brighter and more dense. A trail of twisting colors leads generally ahead, although Han sees out of the coma easily enough. Looking deeper into it hurts his eyes. This relatively dense region is a near vacuum by planetary standards, but it contains dozens of atoms per square centimeter. Each atom glows with every erg of energy it has absorbed from the 2 suns. The ship ceases bucking. They have reached an area of equal gravitational pull between the 2 stars. "Time to fight," Han says, pulling into a tight loop. During the long hyperspace jump, Han, Chewbacca, and their guests drain one power cell from the Falcon's batteries. Keep track of the number of power cells they use during this adventure. All right, this is the second power cell we've used. If Han concentrates fire on one TIE fighter, turn to section 100. If he splits his attention between two, turn to 67. Oh, we got multiple troopers, and each of them are in a turret. Let's split our focus. Like, why not? So we're going to 67. Yeah. That's right, Chris. How you doing, man? All right, 67. The TIEs use a standard head-on approach. To Han's surprise, instead of opening fire at long range, the pilots maneuver to cut off his escape routes. The port side fighter swings high and to the left. The starboard fighter drops low and to the right. These guys aren't your standard TIE pilots, the smuggler mutters aloud. They are aces, Sodara says calmly. You don't say, Han snaps. The Imperial tactics testify to the pilot's experience. The coma's dust, even at a single grain per cubic centimeter, dissipates energy bolts at long range. By concentrating on maneuvering instead of wasting shots, the Imperials force the Corellian to make an unpleasant choice. He can execute only one or two simple maneuvers without challenging the twin suns' overlapping gravity wells. Even shields, Chewbacca. This is going to be tricky. He dips the Falcon's starboard side, presenting the narrowest possible target. Belly guns, target portside fighter, he orders. Top guns, target the starboard fighter. The fighters turn to face the Falcon's vulnerable flanks, then streak inward like the closing mandibles of a Rigorian crab ant. Now! Han yells. The freighter's laser cannons blaze, and 4 blue bolts lance toward each Imperial fighter. The TIE cannons flare in the same instant, catching the freighter in a glittering web of crossfire. The Falcon rocks violently, and half a dozen damage warning lights flare on Chewbacca's panel. Han spins his vessel hard to port, hoping to shake the TIE's targeting computers. An orange ball of flame that was once the portside TIE greets him. We got one, Han yells. Chewbacca barks a report. Great, Han growls. He's on our tail and the shields are stuck forward. We may as well be a target decoy. Out of the corner of his eye, the Corellian catches the braided tongues of color of an ionized gas tail. If Han tries to circle back to face the remaining TIE head-on, turn to section 84. If Han flees for ionized gas tail, turn to section 71. Ooh, oh no. We have the shield's front face forward, so we could easily do that, but the ionized gas tail might just destroy that TIE for us if we race toward it. What do you think? I'm going to give you a second here. All right, let's do the ionized gas tail, 71. Han accelerates for cover in the fiery gas tail. The TIE follows closely, its laser cannons blazing. Apparently, the maneuver alarms the Imperial pilot, for he stops trying to target and is firing wildly. An instant later, the Falcon slips into a bright green stream of gas. The starboard TIE fighter darts beneath the drives. That is the wrong thing to do. The belly guns blaze steadily for 2 full seconds, creating a tempest of energy bursts. When it falls dormant, metal shards are all that remain of the TIE fighter. Han circles slowly, then starts for the far side of the comet. Remarkable flying, Sodara says. If Imperial pilots could fly like that, we'd be dead, the Corellian said. But they can't, and we're alive. Sodara looks hurt. Han quickly adds, the flying wouldn't have meant a thing if your men weren't good gunners. Captain Sodara smiles warmly. Coming from a pilot of your skill, that is high praise indeed. Chewbacca adds a happy groan. He says he's glad he didn't have to shield against them, Han translates. The Falcon leaves the coma. To the left and a little below, a fiery gas tail runs toward Aldo. The ship trembles, then bucks as it leaves the gravity plateau between the 2 stars. I think we've lost the destroyer for good, Han says. This G-field will tear it to pieces. Yes, agrees Sodara. It is remarkable that this scow held together. The smuggler is too busy fighting gravity wells to protest his ship's sturdiness. 15 minutes later, they escape the warring gravity fields. Han activates the nav computer and tells it to chart a course for Tatooine. He and Chewbacca then go aft to run systems checks. Lieutenant Birdlow, the stormtrooper second in command to Sodara, watches the helm. Han is helping Chewie recalibrate a spatial flux dilation spectrometer when Birdlow calls over the intercom. Another ship with a broad aft and narrow forequarters is in the vicinity. It appears to be preparing to enter hyperspace for Tatooine. The smuggler rushes to the cockpit and opens a communications channel. "Leia!" No answer. "We both know she can't fly a starship. Not like I can. I'm not dodging any more Star Destroyers to prove it, and I'm sure as heck not going to Mos Eisley. Have you forgotten the price Jabba put on my head?" There's no answer. "Perhaps her reception channels are closed," Sodara suggests. "They're open," the Corellian insists. "The race is off, Leia. I know who Alfreda Goot is, and I got a deal to keep." The receptor screen activates. It shows a small gray helmet. Long red hair cascades from beneath it. A wicked laugh cackles through the helmet's electronic translator. "Who is Alfreda Goot, Solo?" Han almost doubts his conclusion. Finally he says, "Leia Organa, Princess of Alderaan." The helmeted figure laughs again. "Mos Eisley, Solo." The channel goes dead. "She just activated her hyperdrive," Birdlow reports. "Let her go kill herself," Han exclaims. A moment later he turns to Sodara. "Right?" The Imperial nods. There's no denial in her reply. "Perhaps we should attend to our business." Han nods, but he does not erase Tatooine's coordinates from the nav computer. A moment later he mutters, "No, the cloaking device will keep. It just might be wrong. I just might be wrong for a change." 76. They've been in hyperspace for perhaps 6 hours. Han sits alone in the cockpit. Chewbacca is debugging the hyperdrive control and emergency communication engagement programs on the microaxial HYD nav computer. The Corellian has discovered an open transmission channel 2 hours after entering hyperspace from the Aldo-Spacian comet. Having already rebuilt the transmission hardware a dozen times, Chewie has concluded that a software glitch is causing the transmission unit to open a channel whenever Han engages the hyperdrive. Captain Sodara sticks his head into the cockpit. "May I join you?" he asks. "One can tolerate only so much talk of unpossessed wealth." Han nods to the co-pilot seat. "Do you think the Eradicator plotted our course from the open channel?" he asks. Sodara's face assumes a grim expression. "Yes, but they cannot risk the comet run. We have a 12-hour lead." The pilot frowns. "That might not be enough. I don't know why Leia picked Tatooine as the finish line. If she has a reason, it could take days to talk her into leaving." Nodding thoughtfully, the Imperial agrees. "It would be wiser to change course. We bring trouble with us." Han shakes his head. "I can't." He does not shy away. He does not say why. Doubt is something he keeps to himself. "Vellum wants his deserters, not the Falcon," Sodara says. "Perhaps you should abandon us." "I've told you before," Han shoots back. "I decide who I abandon." "We have a contract on Shador," Captain Sodara continues. "Strictly speaking, you will be dropping us off." "Not my style," the Corellian says. "Maybe I can borrow the cloaking device until we lose the Eradicator." Sodara narrows his eyes and studies Han carefully. "I have thought of that," he said at last, "but your freighter drive is not powerful enough to operate it." Han, Chewbacca, and their guest drain one power... Dang it, another battery cell? That's 3 we've lost. From the Falcon's batteries during this part of their journey, keep track of the number of power cells they use during this adventure. If Han tells Sodara he will go to Shandor, turn to section 111. If Han insists that Chewbacca attempt to install the cloaking device, turn to section 125. But we don't have enough power to operate the cloaking device. Isn't that what he just said? Yeah, it's not powerful enough to operate it. And we've already burned 3 power cells. Oh, good. I'm inclined to go to Shador. Yeah, I think I might do that. What do you think? You don't like Han doubting himself. It's a trap. All right, 111. Let's do this. "We have no choice then," Han says. "We'll drop out of hyperspace tomorrow and turn towards Shador." A moment later he asks, "Leia Organa really is Alfreda Goot, isn't she? I'd hate to lose this race if it endangered Leia." Sodara nods and sighs. "Trust me, you are making the wisest decision for all. If you will excuse me, I will break the news to my men. The commander leaves the cockpit and goes back to the cabin lounge. Han remains in the pilot's seat and stares at the vast emptiness ahead. Sodar's hesitation does not make sense. He's certain that the Falcon's Quad-X power core can energize any cloaking device worthy of the modifier compact. I wish I would have said that before. Perhaps the ex-Imperial fears that Han, being a smuggler, will find the cloaking device too useful to sell. He has a point. 4 hours later, Chewbacca enters the cockpit and reports that he has found nothing wrong with the programs. The Wookiee nearly roars with frustration. Forget it for now, Han says. We have a few days to fix it. Let's go back to the cargo hold. There's something I want to hook up. The Corellian climbs back to the cockpit access corridor, then peers down the main access corridor into the cabin lounge. Sodara and his stormtroopers are engaged in quiet conversation. Only the captain faces the exposed portion of the corridor, and his attention is on his men. Han signals Chewbacca to keep quiet. The Wookiee looks puzzled, but nods his head. Sodara will surely be angry if he caught them snooping around the cloaking device. Han prefers to delay the confrontation until after the device is attached. It will be less likely to grow violent. They sneak quickly down the walkway to the cargo bay bulkhead. The door squeaks as the pilot opens it. He curses himself for not paying more attention to non-functional maintenance. Chewbacca follows him into the bay. Then Han closes the door and activates the ceiling illumination. A black plasteel crate, nearly 4 meters high and 5 meters wide, sits in the middle of the hold. A long seam runs down its middle. The latches have no security locks. Han releases the latches and the seam cracks open. A large black ball rests inside. Chewie grabs one side of the crate and pulls. The seam opens to a width of 1 meter. The ball is a TIE fighter cockpit. Han whistles in astonishment. If a TIE can power the cloaker, then the Falcon can. Chewbacca opens the crate further and steps inside. Can we hook it into our power core? Han asks. The Wookiee mutters a response. He sounds nervous. Too bad, the pilot says. Smuggler's luck. Maybe we can sell it to the Alliance. This prototype ought to be worth a fortune. A loud thump resounds from the crate. Chewie's arm flops onto the floor. Chewbacca! The arm remains limp. Han kneels and feels a rapid, weak pulse. Grunting with effort, he pulls the Wookiee out of the crate. Chewbacca is out, cold, though he shows no sign of physical injury. The Corellian draws his blaster and steps inside. The hair on his neck bristles with, is it anticipation or fear? It is dark inside, though some light slips into the crate via the open seam. He circles the cockpit. Nothing unusual. Han climbs onto one of the shortened support pylons and peers inside. A man sleeps in the pilot's seat. The smuggler presses his face against the viewport. He sees the shape of the head. No, a helmet. A broad neck guard flares from the back of the brim and frames what Han cannot yet see of the face. He wants to say the armored helm is black, but he's not quite correct. An aura of blackness hangs around the helmet, defying the ceiling illuminators to shed light on this particular head. Han continues to stand on the pylon. A breathing screen hides the face from view. Like the helmet, the screen is completely dark. It is a grotesque parody of a face. Where there should be eyes, there are 2 hollows. A terrible darkness looks out from those soulless holes. There should be a nose. Instead, a flat circular area suggests a grotesque deformity. Below that protrudes a triangular filter resembling nothing quite so much as a grinning mouthful of fangs. Unaccountably, the pilot trembles. Vader, he whispers. The air seems suddenly stifling and foul, as if the essence of evil has penetrated the cockpit's airtight seals and is seeping into the close confines of the plasteel box. Han stumbles out of the crate, pale and gagging. He feels afraid in a way he has never known fear, but his body is reacting to more than fear. He feels polluted, as if standing that close to the Dark Lord has covered him with a film of corruption. Chewbacca twitches and moans as if suffering a terrible nightmare. Han shakes his shoulder. Wake up! Chewbacca growls without opening his eyes. The growl is not ferocious, it's pitiful. Han shakes harder. Chewbacca! Snap out of it! Chewbacca bellows and sits up straight. He flings Han across the room, then opens his eyes. Han realizes that he has never before seen true mortal terror in the Wookiee's expression. Chewbacca moans. "It's okay," the pilot says, standing. "Vader's unconscious, or something. We've got to get rid of him." They discuss their options and finally decide to attach a chrono-fused bomb to the cockpit. Darth Vader, as far as they're concerned, practices the blackest arts. Without understanding the reason, Han knows that opening the cockpit and blasting the dormant figure would be foolish to the point of suicide. No, they have to destroy Vader without waking him, while his dark powers sleep with him. Oh, I gotta look at this image. Oh, that's dope! That's dope! Darth Vader! After they enter normal space, Chewbacca will get the drop on the Imperial captain and his men. Han will evacuate the cargo hold, then trigger the chrono fuse. A few minutes later, the bomb will destroy the cockpit and Vader with it. They'll dump Sodara and his deserters, then head to Tatooine to meet Leia. Chewie takes Han's chronometer and goes out to the portside bulkhead to the engineering station. The pilot nervously places the hold, expecting Sodara to charge into the bay at any moment. 20 minutes later, the Wookiee returns with the bomb and Han's chronometer. To trigger the bomb, Han simply has to enter the fuse delay into his chronometer, then activate it. The Corellian relaxes a little. They'll be heroes again. "Wait until Leia hears about this." Chewbacca grunts in response. "You're right," he says. "She'll think we're just making excuses for losing the race. Get the holocronder. So we can prove we destroyed Darth Vader," the pilot says. "Leia will be unbearable if she thinks she beat me in a fair race." Chewbacca moans in bewilderment and goes to get the holocorder. Han plants the bomb in the back of the cockpit, then awaits Chewbacca's return. A few minutes later, the starboard bulkhead door opens. Sodara stands in the doorway, 2 stormtroopers at his back. Each holds a blaster rifle trained on Han. The smuggler looks at the blaster rifles, then at the crate, then back to Sodara. "This isn't a cloaking device," he says accusingly. Sodara smiles. "No, it's not, and we are hardly deserters. Perhaps you would have been wiser not to discover the truth." "What is the truth?" Han demands. The Imperial officer motions Han back. A trooper goes to the crate and glances inside to make sure Vader's cockpit remains undisturbed. "My men will take care of our cargo," Sodara says. "No doubt, being a friend of Leia Organa, you recognize Lord Vader." "Yeah, I recognize his vileness." The trooper prods Han toward the bulkhead. Sodara steps aside. "Flattery may save your life, Captain Solo. Shall we join your friend in the lounge?" "So why is the Eradicator after you?" "Political differences. Governor-General Vellum envies our commander's influence with the Emperor. The destruction of the Death Star made the situation worse." Han enters the lounge. 2 of Sodara's men guard Chewbacca with blaster rifles. "How so?" he asks. Sodara motions the pilot to a seat. "The Battle of Yavin occurred in Vellum's sector. To punish Vellum for allowing the rebels to establish a base under his nose, the Emperor placed 5 of Vellum's most productive planets under Vader's administration." "But how can he have known Vader lived?" Han interrupts. "Like Lord Vader," Sodara explains, "the Emperor has ways. However, I think he's underestimated Vellum's spite." "A bad mistake," Han says, "but it looks like Vader's nearly dead anyway." "The Emperor assures us he is merely dormant. When we open the cockpit, he will awaken." "So why haven't you opened it?" the Corellian demands. "You sure could have saved me a lot of trouble." "Indeed. Why not?" Sodara asks. "I've answered enough questions. Let us say Vellum has done all he can to prevent our success. You, Captain Solo, will do all you can to ensure it, and will take us to Shandor." Han shakes his head. "Do it yourself," he says. "I have considered this option," Sodara replies, "but Lieutenant Birdlow informs me that you have placed certain security programs in the flight and nav computers." "Sharp guy," Han comments. "You have a choice," Sodara continues. "Take us to Shandor, or die. Your friend goes first." Instead of answering, Han looks at his wrist chronometer, then quickly glances at Chewbacca. The Wookiee shakes his head slightly, indicating he has not revealed the presence of the bomb. "When you put it that way, I'd say we better get started on new hyperspace calculations." Turn to section 144. Oh, man. 147. 145. 144. The trip to Shandor lasts only 2 days, but it seems an eternity. Now that Sodara's charade has ended, the atmosphere is tense and antagonistic in the Falcon's cramped quarters. A guard watches the smugglers at all times, even while they sleep. Han's mood is sullen and rude, even to Chewbacca. He spends the trip alternately cursing himself for trusting Sodara and silently berating Leia for getting him into this mess. Although Sodara has hinted that he will release the spacers after Shandor, Han harbors no illusions. Like all Imperial officers, the captain is an accomplished liar. As soon as he no longer needs the Falcon's crew, he'll arrest or execute them. As they drop into normal space, Sodara steps into the cockpit. "You will be rid of us soon, Captain Solo." Han fingers his chronometer. "One way or another," he mutters. The bomb will explode in 10 hours, unless he cancels the countdown. Han hopes he and Chewbacca will be safely on their way to their rendezvous with Leia, even if they're now sure to lose the race. Shandor orbits its white sun at a distance of only 100 million kilometers. Murky clouds of gray and black swirl over its surface, hiding its pariah population from the gaze of the galaxy's decent creatures. Where the clouds do not cover the planet, dirty green seas and yellow-brown continents cast a mottled reflection back toward its star. Shandor's air, Han remembers, stinks so badly that it hurts to breathe. It'll be a fitting place to dump Darth Vader's body, but not his own if he can avoid it. 3 of Shador's 5 moons hang in sight. From those moons, an odd assortment of starfighters rushes to meet the Falcon. There are 2 TIE fighters, an X-Wing, and a couple of other craft Han does not recognize. He reaches to open a hailing channel. The transmitter is already activated. Han pauses long enough to cause Chewbacca to take notice. This time, he does not suspect for even a second that Chewie failed to repair it correctly. The 2 of them worked the entire communication system over from the hardware to software. Someone opened the channel and left it open intentionally. Han says nothing, however, and hails the approaching interceptor. "Outlaw! Outlaw! This is the Free Freighter Millennium Falcon requesting sanctuary." The escort splits to all sides and approaches the Falcon. "Transmit the code," orders a coarse voice. Han calls the outlaw code from the flight computer and transmits it to the X-Wing. The response comes a moment later. "Welcome to Shandor, Han. You have a berthing fee this time?" The smuggler switches off the transmitter and turns to Sodara. "Do you have 1,000 credits?" Sodara shakes his head. "I can issue an Imperial voucher." "Great." Han activates the transmitter again. "My passenger's credit is good." "It better be," the voice snaps. "You know what we do to stiffs." Since Captain Sodara's contact lives in Fink's Hole, Han berths the Falcon at nearby Mud Station. The launch stations lie in concrete-lined Durasteel cones. The cones rest above Shandor's swampy surface on immense pylons. After berthing the ship, Han takes Sodara's voucher chip and meets the port boss, an Altorian bird. He has a large hooked beak, golden eyes, and a feathery skull covering that sweeps away from his face. As the Altorian appraises him, Han feels as though the bird is more interested in eating him than in doing business with him. As Han feared, the port boss has no interest in an Imperial voucher. They argue up and down bureaucratic channels for hours before the angry avian agrees to accept a blaster rifle as payment. When he returns to the Falcon, Han finds Sodara's humor no better than the Shandorians. Vader's agent has not yet answered the Imperial summons. Sodar orders Han to guide him to the agent's address, and Han in his second lengthy argument of the day. Sodar insists upon wearing his uniform into Fink's Hole, while Han remains entirely unarmed. But Shandor is not a place to wear unusual uniforms advertising off-world origins, especially Imperial uniforms, and it is most definitely not a place to walk around lightly armed. After convincing Sodara to remove his uniform and trust his captive with a blaster rifle, Han leads the way out of Mud Station. Like all of Shandor's burrows, Fink's Hole is built upon massive support pylons sunk deep into the planet's swampy surface. Endless rows of dingy structures rise 10 to 12 meters out of the swamp. The bottom floor of each building is dedicated to commerce, gambling dens, houses of ill repute, weapons shops, and so forth. Prices, where actual numbers appear, are cheap, and a handful of credits will likely assuage just about any need a body could have. In front of each shop, life forms of every type walk, scuttle, or crawl along a narrow walkway. A green, filmy canal upon which floats all types of shallow water craft separates the rows of buildings. Most of the boats, whether immense freight hauling broadhorns or zippy passenger bateaus, rely upon hydrogen turbines for propulsion. The jets are mounted atop A-shaped Durasteel superstructures in the aft. The fact that the Shadorians still use the ancient drive systems amazes Han. Although as fast as nearly as powerful as repulsor lifts, the hydrogen turbines have maintenance problems. They occasionally explode. Han guesses that in the outlaw world, spare parts are easier to acquire for turbines than for repulsor craft. The sweet smell of rot pervades the sulfury air to such an extent that Sodara gags. I didn't think bad smells bothered Imperials, Han comments. An unexpected need to retch cuts Sodara's reply short. Han smiles and hails a public flatboat. Han, who understands Shador's layout, works hard for the next hour to keep track of the taxi boat's course. Sodara quickly loses his bearings and his face shows his frustration. Even to an experienced military officer, Shador's twisted canals are an impenetrable web of half-turns and hairpins. The fact that the driver doubles back several times to hike the fare only adds to Sodara's confusion. When the rusty driver droid stops at last, Han pays the fare without objection. It won't hurt to let Sodara believe their twisted course has been the most direct. Han can only assume the flatboat has brought them to the right address, for none of the buildings are marked. This neighborhood has deteriorated more than most. Many buildings have no covering over the windows or doorways, and several lie collapsed across the canals. These collapsed buildings create wide dams of debris, although someone has cleared a narrow channel to maintain access to the neighborhood. Han and Sodara stand in front of a grimy 5-story building. A foreboding tavern occupies the lowest floor. The building next to the tavern has collapsed. Nothing but a pile of rubble remains. Derelicts of all races litter a walkway up and down the canal. Han approaches a Twi'lek with an amputated right skull tentacle. The bum smells of cheap liquor intoxicants. "Can you tell me where the Zaboron Gamma 452 is?" The Twi'lek lifts his gaze to Han's face. His eyes are glossy and unfocused. "Sure can," he slurs. "And something else, too. How about a credit or 3 for my trouble?" Decide how many credits Han should give the Twi'lek. Turn to section 11. All right, he wants a credit or 3. He's a bum. Just give him 3 credits. That's not going to hurt you. Yeah, I think I'm going to do 3 credits. Turn to section 110. Come on. Han studies the Twi'lek. "How much is your help worth?" he asks. The Twi'lek eyes clear a bit. "That depends." "On what?" Sodara demands impatiently. The Twi'lek sneers. "How much you know about Shador?" He held out his hand. If in section 144 Han decided to give the Twi'lek nothing, turn to 104. If he decided 1 to 5 credits, turn to 85. 6 to 9 credits, 77. Decided to give the Twi'lek 10 or more credits, 97. All right, I said 3, so I'm going to go to 85. And I have no idea how much money I have. So, they didn't say it all, so that's why I just said 3. All right, 85. The Twi'lek withdraws his hand and pockets the currency. "Into the bar. Turn right. Don't stop to talk. 4th floor." With that, the beggar lurches to his feet and stumbles into the tavern. Turn to section 109. All right. The interior of the tavern is no more inviting than the outside was, but Han and Sodara don't stop to savor the atmosphere. Just to the right of the entrance, Han spies a Durasteel door, obviously the lift to the higher floors. The human bartender glances up assessingly in their direction when they first entered. Now the Corellian gives him a short nod. "We're going up." Without missing a glass, the man slaps the bar rag with which he was wiping out his crystal against a hidden button, and the Durasteel door hisses apart behind them. Turn to 101. Geez, where are we going? Who is buying Vader? That's what I want to know. The lift opens. Han and Sodara step into an unkempt communal lounge. In the center of the room sits a hollow console. The image of a Twi'lek female gyrates to lewd music. A dozen sleeping cubicles are arranged around the lounge area. Although each cubicle has 4 walls and a door, razor wire serves as a ceiling for all. The humans armed with blaster pistols and 4 Gamorrean guards carry vibroaxes occupy the lounge. Judging by the dark gray suits they wear, they do not reside in this establishment. They have smashed open cubicle 452. Vader's agent lives in public dormitory? Han whispers. The lift door closes behind them. Sodara shrugs. He is Togorian. Try to take one of these gentlemen alive. Easier said than done, Han mutters. He considers his options. He can fire the Gamorreans. Although they are probably not the brains behind the group, they are certainly the muscle. The trouble with this plan is that there are more Gamorreans than Han can shoot at once. He can also try to bluff the Hoods into surrendering. Han favors this plan, but he is acutely aware that his con jobs sometimes fail, especially with unversed accomplices. Or he can fire at the humans, hoping that the Gamorreans will not be such a problem without their bosses. Oh boy. So do we fire the Gamorreans? Do we try to bluff the Hoods? Or do we fire at the humans? Look, no matter what, we're going to have to deal with immediate fire if we attack any of them. And I do not want the Gamorreans to be the ones not to die or to just come after me if I attack the humans. I choose life. So, yeah, this is definitely a Han move. We are going to definitely bluff the Hoods. All right, 95. Stay where you are, Han orders. Why? Asks the human. His question takes Han by surprise, and he hesitates. Because we're Imperial officers. Oh, because we're Imperial officers, Sodara states evenly. Han groans inwardly. This is exactly the wrong thing to say on Shador. We have a squad of stormtroopers downstairs, Sodara continues. The Hoods laugh. Then the humans motion for the Gamorreans to charge. Damn it. Han fires and a Gamorrean drops. Sodara's shot severs a human's right arm. Oh shit. He screams in agony and his pistol clatters to the floor. The other 3 Gamorreans rush Han, and the remaining man fires at Sodara. Han ducks the first 2 Gamorrean axes, then reaches back and presses the call button for the lift. He does not want to tangle with axe-wielding Gamorreans. The pork-faced race is legendary throughout the galaxy for its proficiency with polearms. The flat of the 3rd Gamorrean's axe glances off Han's left shoulder. The shoulder goes numb, and his arm drops to his side. What did I do to deserve this? Han cries. He couldn't care less about the spy these Hoods have presumably killed. In fact, if he worked for Vader, they have done the galaxy a big favor. So Han wonders why he's risking his life to avenge the Stoolies' murder. This isn't his style. All he wants to do is unload Vader's crate before it detonates. This is not his idea of stalling. The lift doors open. Come on, Han calls. The lift's here. Sodara shakes his head and fires again. We must find Taslo. Han cradles the blaster barrel with his left arm. It is painful, but at least he can point in the right direction. He pulls the trigger and his rifle blazes. They were waiting for us. It does not matter, Sodara answers, dodging a wild vibroaxe swing. And you must not abandon me. If Han forsakes Sodara, turn to 86. If he continues to fight alongside Sodara, turn to 134. Oh, jeez. Forsakes. So if he just goes down the lift, he's going to have to deal with the troopers if he gets back there. Sodara's probably going to die. The troopers are probably going to kill Han because their leader's gone. I feel like we have to help. All right, 134. The lift door closes behind Han. I hope I don't regret this, he says. Although his arm hurts terribly, the shock has subsided enough that he can use it. You won't, Sodara promises. He fires at the human again. My men have execution orders in case you returned alone. Some pal, Han says. He jams the butt of his blaster rifle into a Gamorrean's stomach, then turns the weapon toward another of the axe-wielding aliens and pulls the trigger. It falls, screaming in agony. Turn to 118. Han fires past the Gamorrean charge at one of the humans. His shot goes wide. Then he has to face the porcine creature face to face. A Gamorrean axe crashes to the floor on Han's right. Another clangs off the wall to his left. "We need maneuvering room," the smuggler yells. He rushes to the center of the lounge and leaps atop the hollow console. The image of the Twi'leks continues to dance. Han almost feels as if he has two bodies. Sodara, follows him into the room, but chooses to stand on the floor at Han's back. Both men fire their blaster rifles at the bosses. Han briefly glimpses one man staring dumbly at a smoking wound in his torso. Sodara lets out a victory whoop. The Gamorreans swing their vibro axes again. Without the human superiors, the green-skinned brutes fight without discipline. Han jumps a slow swing, then sidesteps a hazardous thrust. He pulls his blaster trigger twice, and two Gamorreans stumble backward, puzzled expressions on their pained faces. Han turns to help Sodara, but the wiry Imperial has already downed his opponents. Two mounds of gray-suited green flesh lie at his feet. "Why'd they bother buying suits for those things?" Han wonders. Sodara is already too busy to respond. He searches Cubicle 452 first, then goes through the effects of their opponents. So thorough is the Imperial captain that it requires several hours. Han does not bother to help. He knows why they were ambushed. One of Sodara's men has arranged Taslo's death. "I cannot understand this," Sodara says at last. "Who are these mercenaries? What happened to Taslo?" Han does not explain. It makes no difference to him whether his bomb or Governor General Vellum kills Vader. He looks at his chronometer. The bomb will detonate in an hour. If he doesn't succeed in ejecting Vader before the device explodes, Han hopes Leia will eventually learn what he has done. He isn't as concerned that she knows why he lost her race as he is that she knows why he and Chewbacca died. Han doesn't consider himself one given to noble sacrifices, but after standing close to Vader, he has a better understanding of what motivates Leia and young Luke Skywalker too. Without understanding why, it seems important that Leia know that he has shared some small part of her dream. The Corellian nudges a corpse with his foot. "I don't think they're going to spill the beans," he says. "Let's get back to Mud Station before the Eradicator arrives." Han wants one last chance to save the Falcon, Chewbacca, and himself. "Yes," Sodara answers. "If they know we came to Shador, and it's imperative they do, they might have arrived by now." As they step into the lift, Sodara says, "It's unfortunate we are enemies. You would make a worthy friend." "Yeah," Han answers. "Too bad." "Perhaps I can persuade Lord Vader to pardon you. If I seek you for my unit, it is possible." Han shakes his head. "Sorry, your choice of company stinks." The lift door opens in an empty tavern. Han leads the way toward the exit. The Imperials sigh. "Then we must remain enemies." "I guess so." Han sneers. He isn't sure whether the offer should insult or flatter him. As they step outside, half a dozen energy bolts strike the doorframe. "Now what?" A team of stormtroopers approaches Zoberon Gamma on the Broadhorn. Han fires at the large craft, then runs up the walkway toward a swift-looking bateau. Sodara, providing covering fire, follows more slowly. Han jumps into the bateau. A furred biped about a meter tall sits at the helm. It jabbers at Han in a tongue he does not understand, and its large eyes show its anger. "Sorry, short stuff," Han says. He grabs the furry creature and tosses it in a slimy canal. The effort strains his left shoulder. The creature weighs much more than it appeared to. Sodara leaps into the boat. "Can you drive this?" he asks. "Does it have an engine?" Han's question puzzles Sodara. "Of course." "Then I can drive it," Han answers. A pair of mucky paws grab the gunwale. Han smacks them with the butt of his rifle butt. The creature whines and slips back into the scummy canal. Han engages the drive, and the bateau leaps away from the walkway. Sodara continues to fire back over Han's head. Considering their relationship, Han feels less than comfortable about that. However, he has no time to object. With the throttle open wide, they streak up the canal. A blaster bolt zips through the turbine support structure. Han starts involuntarily, then begins dodging wildly. Energy bursts sizzle into the filthy water on both sides of the boat, scenting the air with ammonia. "We'll soon lose them!" Sodara yells. He continues to fire at the pursuers. With Han jerking the boat in random directions, he has small chance of hitting anything. "Want to bet?" Han answers. They're fast approaching a collapsed building. Han doubts that he can negotiate the narrow channel leading through the debris at his present speed. Just before the dam, a side canal opens to the right. It is perhaps 2 meters wider than the partially dammed channel. If Han tries to negotiate the dam narrowed channel, turn to 96. If he goes into the side canal, turn to 102. I'm inclined to go to the side canal because he doesn't think he can do the channel. Yeah. I think we're going to do the side canal. Narrow channel? You want to do the narrow channel? All right, why not? If we die, it's your fault. 96 is said, right? Han points the bow at the narrow channel and steadies the bateau's course. The hydrogen turbine's whine rises in pitch and also steadies. A moment later, red and blue energy bolts begin whizzing between the legs of the turbine's superstructure with alarming regularity. Han does not resume evasive maneuvers. He worries more about clearing the dam of debris than suffering a hit from the stormtroopers. As they approach the falling building, Han sees the channel bend slightly to the left. On the other end, a long, narrow canal boat maneuvers to enter the narrow passage. It carries so much cargo that its gunnels nearly ride submerged. A stack of plasteel crates obstructs the pilot's view. "Hold on!" Han yells. It appears the canal boat will enter the passage about the same time Han reaches the far end. He does not want to imagine the collision that will result if the canal boat enters the channel before they clear it. So Dara continues trading shots with the Broadhorn. If Han slows down to allow the canal boat to pass, turn to 156. If he tries to beat the canal boat through the passage, turn to 140. All right, so here's the image. This is a cool little image. So that's the big canal boat that's coming. Are we going to try to beat it? Or are we going to slow down and let it go by? If it goes by, it's going to block the other, the dangerous people. Try to beat it, huh? All right, you're running fast and loose here. Just like Solo. Han enters the near end of the channel a few seconds before the canal boat reaches the far end. Energy bolts continue to sing through the support structure as Han negotiates the rocky channel. So Dara fires almost constantly, regardless of the fact that he stands as much chance of hitting the pilot as the pursuing stormtroopers. They reach the bend and Han nudges the control stick. The bateau's aft skids to starport, and the whole craft shakes as it bangs into debris. The port side rises a full meter into the stinking air. Han closes the throttle down and straightens the rudder. The hull flops back onto the water. Sodara screams in triumph, and Han hazards a look back. The stormtrooper's Broadhorn is slowed to a crawl at the channel mouth. It is only centimeters of clearance on each side. Han opens the throttle wide. The Bateau shoots out of the channel as the canal boat enters. As they streak past, an astonished Twi'lek fights to steady the rocking craft. "We'll be back to the Falcon in no time," Han calls. Turn to 119. All right, well done. As Han and Sodara walk up the Falcon's entry ramp, Han checks his chronometer. 20 minutes. "Prepare to leave port," Sodara orders. "What happened?" Lieutenant Birdlow demands, following them toward the cockpit. The captain tells Birdlow that they found what they found in Fink's hole. "If Vellum has stormtroopers there," Birdlow says, "the Eradicator must be here. Perhaps leaving port is not wise." "What would you do?" Sodara snaps. "Wait until Vellum's agents come here too?" "No, sir," Birdlow replies meekly. Sodara remains motionless for several minutes. Only the faint trembling of his upper lip belies his anger. At last he says, "Vellum is everywhere. We cannot hide from him. Perhaps we must simply run." Han checks his watch. 15 minutes. "Now, hold on," he says. "First I saved you. Then I brought you to Shador. If you think I'm going to try to outrun a Star Destroyer, you can take your chances against the Eradicator," Sodara says, drawing his sidearm, "or you can die here." Han pushes the blaster barrel aside with one finger. "It's no big deal," he says nonchalantly. Where are we going?" "I must think," Sodara says. 5 minutes later, Chewbacca reports that they are ready for liftoff. Sodara still does not give the order to leave. Han is growing nervous. His last hope is to blow the external cargo hatch and evacuate the hold before the bomb explodes. That will not work unless they're in space. Tatooine, Sodara says at last. I might find help there, and it's outside Willem's sector. The Corellian checks his watch. 4.5 minutes. Fine, he says. He streaks skyward and swings around the planet, hoping to avoid the Eradicator. Once they're in space, Han enters Tatooine's coordinates in the nav computer and activates the astrogation program. 3.5 minutes. Chewbacca growls an urgent warning. The pilot drops his attention to the flight computer vid screen. A destroyer-sized wedge approaches from the far horizon. It is dispatching a squadron of TIE fighters. Looks like the party's over, Han says. They'll be here in 4 minutes. Battle stations, Lieutenant Birdlow! Sodara orders. The lieutenant comes to the main cabin to spread the alarm. I don't see the problem, Captain Solo, Sodara says. The nav computer should finish the calculations in plenty of time. This isn't a DNS super circuit, Han bluffs. We need at least 6 minutes for that calculation. Sodara levels his gun at Han. Let's hope not. Chewbacca moves a paw to the cargo hold evacuation switch. Han checks his watch. 2 minutes. Still enough time to recover the crate if Sodara acts fast. Han shakes his head ever so slightly. All three watch the TIE fighters close in. The pilot moves away, but at far less than top speed. He wants Sodara's men to be concentrating upon a space battle when he blows the cargo hatch. The nav computer beeps and displays the ready signal. 30 seconds. Han does not activate the hyperdrive. Go to hyperspace, Sodara demands. The first long-range TIE shots burst to starboard. No, Han says. We've got to dump a bomb. A bomb? Sodara asks. Han smiles. Yeah, it used to be a cloaking device. A look of terror crosses Sodara's face. Lord Vader? Han looks at his chronometer. 15 seconds, he announces. Sodara laughs bitterly and holsters his blaster. Then we both lose, Captain Solo. The pilot does not like Sodara's tone. How? I know Alfreda Goot. Lord Vader has hired her on occasion. He is a ruthless murderer. Han stops his countdown. 3 seconds. You just bought some time. Alfreda is a bounty hunter, Sodara explains. If she has Leia, Lord Vader will not make his final journey alone. You knew that Alfreda wasn't really Leia? Yes, Sodara says, all along. Han hits Sodara, then jumps from his chair and grabs the Imperial in a chokehold. You lying scum! The Imperial has purposefully misled him and placed Leia's life in danger, and that angers Han beyond control. His fury surprises him. Even if it was his own life that Sodara threatened, he would have remained more calm and in control of himself. He tightens his grip on Sodara. He just can't help himself. The Falcon rocks with the first near miss. Its laser cannons flare in response. Chewbacca ignores the melee and tugs the control of the freighter. Swamp slug! Han screams. The race he had dismissed as a stupid practical joke now seems the most important thing in the galaxy. He has to win it. Just as soon as he finishes with Sodara. I'll kill you! How will you help her? Sodara gasps. Or do you simply seek a scapegoat for her death as well? Han relaxes his grip. What are you saying? That Alfreda kidnapped Leia to lure you into a trap. You would have seen this were you not so determined to lay your troubles at her feet. A TIE fighter screams past the cockpit. Half a dozen of the Falcon's probing energy bolts follow close behind. The race was a setup. He releases Sodara entirely. The Imperial nods. Then it can't be Leia's fault. Precisely, Sodara says. What are we going to do about it? Chewbacca growls a warning about the destroyer's range. Han looks around the cockpit as if awakening from a long sleep. 8 TIEs at medium range, and the Eradicator closing into tractor beam. How about Vader's life for Leia's? No tricks? Agreed, Sodara says. Now, activate the hyperspace. The hyperdrive. Not yet. What now? Sodara yells. We still have someone to dump, he says. Han tells Sodara about the open transmission channel. One of your men must be working for Vellum. I have been as blind as you, Sodara says. There's no other explanation. But who? I know how to find out. Han overrides the automatic switch in the power core and manually punches over to the next cell in the hodgepodge of power cells and power core from which the Millennium Falcon draws her energy. The freighter's shipboard light flickers. A moment later, Sadara makes an announcement over the intercom. "Attention! The Falcon is disabled. We cannot flee. We will fight until the last minute. Then eject Lord Vader's cockpit and overload the ship's power core. Of course, this means our deaths, but perhaps it will shield our commander from detection." Sadara and Chewbacca go to guard the cargo hold. Han attempts to dodge tie shots without revealing that the Falcon is fully operational. 30 seconds later, the port escape pod ejects. "Target the escape pod," Han orders. 4 bolts strike the unarmored pod almost instantly. Then Han activates the hyperdrive. Han's trick does not drain any power cells. Check the tally you have been keeping. If the travelers have drained 4 or more power cells from the Falcon's batteries, turn to section 136. If they have used 3 or less power cells, turn to section 105. We have used 3. 105. Let's hope it's good. "I have difficulty accepting that Birdlow is the traitor," Sadara says. "His record is excellent." "Serves you right for believing a report," Han says. "I trust only my instincts. I'm a great judge of character." They have just come out of hyperspace. A vast globe which casts a flickering topaz light into space hangs below the Falcon's viewport. The planet is almost bright enough and large enough to be a small sun, but it's not. It is, at last, the desert world of Tatooine. Its peculiar star-like glow is the result of sodium-rich sands phosphorescing in the light of its twin suns. Sadara studies Han with a sardonic grin. "We shall see how well you judge character, Captain Solo." Sadara's stormtroopers are ready for action, and Darth Vader's crate has been prepared for unloading. Han taps his chronometer. "Don't think I trust for a moment," he says. "Double-crossed me, and 3 seconds later, Vader is cosmic dust." Chewbacca has sealed Vader's crate with a tamper-proof lock. Any attempt to remove the cockpit before Han deactivates the bomb will trigger an explosion. It is Han's insurance policy. "I was speaking of Elfrida Goot," Sadara says. "She is as ruthless as she is enigmatic." "Sure," Han responds. Sadara does not need to remind Han of the Imperial insurance policy. He and Chewbacca have not been without an armed escort since leaving Shador. Despite their pledges not to double-cross each other, neither man is taking any chances. In fact, Han still hopes he can destroy Vader, though he will not risk Leia's life to do so. Having accepted that she does not fake her own kidnapping, Han is determined to save her, even if it means letting Vader live. He has no doubt that Leia will disapprove of this decision, but if he allows the princess to die because he has a price on his head, Han knows that the rest of his life will be as pointless as it will be miserable. That Sadara also intends to double-cross him, Han has no doubt. The man has already demonstrated his talent for deception. The Corellian now analyzes everything the Imperial says and does, and his trigger finger never moves far from the chronometer. If Leia's life does not depend on cooperating with the Imperials, Han would long ago have detonated the bomb and taken his chances with their superior numbers. Unfortunately, he does not have that option. When the spaceport officials calls for the ship's registry, Han discovers, to top everything off, that the Falcon's radio is malfunctioning. Whether from battle damage or general disrepair isn't obvious. Chewie grumbles about maintenance as Han tries to hear their berth designation through the symphony of pops and crackles. "I heard Bay 32. And proceeding to that location," the Corellian finally replies. "Never did like that Chedak circuitry much. It's sloppy." He mutters for the general audience. Captain Sadara refrains from comment. The pilot descends to the haphazard arrangement of crater-shaped depressions Mos Eisley calls a spaceport. As soon as the Falcon touches down, Sadara gives one of the men a voucher chip and sends him to pay the berthing fees. Unlike Shador, no portmaster on Tatooine will dare refuse Sadara's voucher. The planet is seldom without Imperial visitors. Han and Sadara discuss strategy. "We do not know if Elfrida has beaten us or not. The wisest course is to reconnoiter the cantina before making our move." "Good idea," Han says. "Let's go." "One moment," Sadara says. "Elfrida is undoubtedly expecting you. However, I doubt that my presence will alarm her. I should go alone." Han hesitates. He does not like the idea of letting the Imperial officer out of his sight. The man has consistently proved his capacity for subterfuge, and the stakes here are Leia's life and his own. On the other hand, Sidara's proposal is tactically sound and will no doubt provide an edge against Elfrida. It also keeps Han out of sight as much as possible. Jabba has spies everywhere on Tatooine, and Han suspects that the Crime Master will know of Han's arrival within the same hour he shows himself. Both he and Leia will be much safer if he can conclude his business with Elfrida and leave quickly. If Han sends Sidara to reconnoiter the cantina, turn to 137. If Han rejects Sidara's proposal, turn to 128. I mean, I think 137. I think we have to let Sidara go in on our behalf. We might be able to deal with another Greedo situation, but... excuse me. I don't know. I'm going to let Sidara go in. 137. You make sense, Han says. We'll wait here. Sidara sighs and smiles. You're a good judge of character, he says. I'll need some method of reporting back in case there is trouble. Han gives Sidara his comlink. After Sidara leaves, Chewbacca growls a question. What can he do? Han responds. Any trouble from him, and Vader pops like Rigorian blood might. Chewbacca rumbles unease. Time crawls. Waiting has never been Han's strong point, and the tension on board the freighter mounts in direct proportion to the time elapsing. At last, the Wookiee pushes himself to his feet. No! Han snaps immediately. What if he comes back when we're out? We need to stay in touch. Reluctantly, Chewie nods, but he doesn't return to his seat, instead prowling around the ship in search of an outlet for his frustration. Han perches tersely in the pilot's chair. Where is Sidara? Could he have figured some way around the smuggler's precautions? He could kick himself for giving a comlink to an obviously untrustworthy scout. Better to have braved Jabba's minions. The comlink on the console crackles. Sidara's voice comes in low and clear. Captain, my report. Han grabs the slim cylinder, bellowing over his shoulder for the co-pilot. There are 8 desperate-looking creatures in the tavern. I overheard one of them say that Elfrida is running late. Interesting, Han says. He motions to the Wookiee. Let's go. Chewie cocks his head toward the stormtroopers, now at attention in the lounge. Oh yeah, the Corellian raises his voice slightly. Action, guys! We're meeting your captain at the cantina. Turn to section 113. Where are we? There it is. Han and Chewbacca stop in front of the dockside cafe. It is constructed of the new plasfoam blocks, gaining popularity on desert and Arctic worlds alike. There are only a few assorted ground transports parked around the building, but the volume of clatter which drifts into the scorched streets whenever the door opens indicates a sizable crowd. Though this is not one of the ageless taverns free freighters prefer, it must draw its clientele from the surrounding spaceport. Han dislikes the place immediately. The absence of free freighters in a spaceport bar means the presence of tourists, shipping lane crew, Imperial personnel, and other chumps. Han signals Sidara and his men to wait, then steps into the cantina doorway. The tavern is stylishly decorated in an Art Galactic theme. It is also clean, filled to 3/4 capacity, and too well lit for Han's taste. The customers are, for the most part, clean-cut and of harmless appearance. Only a few are armed. A dozen insectoids sit at a table near the entrance, chirping and clacking their forelimbs together in a serious argument. A bug-eyed Piscine lies in a bar couch holding a drink tube between 2 fins. From the way its artificial gills puff, Han knows the fish will bother no one. He studies the rest of the patrons. These are creatures with 1 eye and a dozen ears, and creatures with a dozen ears and a dozen eyes and no ears. Some of the aliens have skin, some fur, and 1 or 2 a glistening, rough-textured face that defies description. A steady gaggle of conversation in a dozen alien languages buzzes throughout the room. The place makes the pilot nervous. No one expects trouble. When it develops, they will panic or interfere. Nothing is to his advantage. Chewbacca nudges Han and nods toward the other side of the room. In the shadows of the back corner, 8 aliens of various races sit without conversing. There are 2 Gamorreans, a Twi'lek, 2 Togorian males, and 3 4-eyed, 6-armed anthropoids Han does not recognize. He cannot see whether they are armed. Looks like they're waiting for someone, Han says. Chewie grunts a barely audible comment. Maybe it's Elfreda, he answers, and maybe not. After all, this is Mos Eisley. The smuggler hesitates. He can use Sodara's troops to chase the aliens from the bar, but if they're not Elfreda's hirelings, he will be tipping his hand to anyone she does have in the cantina. If they are Elfreda's goons, chasing them off before she arrives will give him a tremendous advantage. Okay, so if Han brings Sodara's stormtroopers into the cantina now, turn to section 131. If he sends his men to hide until Elfreda arrives, turn to 148. I'm not inclined to tip my hand. I would rather wait, knowing that we have troopers that can come in. Yeah, I'm going to send them to hide. That makes sense to me. 148. 147. 148. Han signals Sodara to hide until it looks like he's needed, then enters the cantina to wait. He and Chewbacca take a seat near a section of transwall where Sodara can see them from outside. For the next 20 minutes, Han watches the 8 aliens in the corner attempt to watch him without being obvious. Are they Elfreda's goons, or do they recognize him? He half expects them to attempt to collect Jabba's reward right here in the bar. Han does not doubt that they will ambush him if he leaves. He has just decided to signal Sodara when the stockroom door opens. Leia stands in the doorway, her hands bound behind her back. Despite her situation, she looks as confident and beautiful as ever. She scans the bar as if searching for a friend. Han hopes he is still that friend, if he has ever been. A figure stands behind her in a full duralloy suit of blaster armor. The bounty hunter holds a blaster pistol against the small of Leia's back. There is a black strap looped around Leia's neck in a slip knot. Han assumes Elfreda holds the other end. I win, Han calls merrily. He pulls the blaster pistol from its holster and holds it in his lap. Leia turns to Han. I'm sorry, Han. This is a trap. Elfreda jerks the strap and chokes off Leia's warning. Don't think this is your fault, Leia, the Corellian says. I know all about Elfreda. Elfreda pushes Leia forward. Then you know what I want, Solo, she says. You lured me to collect Jabba's reward. Elfreda nods. It was easier than trying to bring you by force. Han aims his blaster at the bounty hunter. Let her go, Elfreda. The aliens in the corner stand and level their weapons at Han. Chewbacca growls in anger and lifts his bowcaster to face off the 8 aliens. The odds are not good, even for Han. A cold laugh crackles from Elfreda's translator. You're in no position to issue orders. So you think, Han says. I have half a dozen stormtroopers waiting outside. Leia frowns a query at Han and mouths the words, Are you crazy? Second chance, Elfreda. Let her go, Han demands. Sorry, Solo. I made a big investment in you, and your bluffs are not enough to deter me. She turns her blaster pistol toward him. He ducks beneath the table and fires at the aliens. He does not want to risk Leia's life by firing at Elfreda. The room erupts into whistles, flashes, and dull crumps as the aliens pull their blasters' triggers. Patrons scream in terror and dive for cover. Where's Sodara? Han cries. Chewbacca shrugs and fires another round at Elfreda's aliens. The crash of overturning furniture fills the room, and the smell of burning cloth begins to permeate the air. Han pulls his trigger again. Then, noticing a distinct lack of fire from Elfreda's direction, Han checks on Leia's welfare. Leia has leapt backward and trapped Elfreda against a wall. The princess is kicking at Elfreda's lower legs in an attempt to sweep the bounty hunter's feet from beneath her. Elfreda struggles unsuccessfully to tighten the leash around Leia's throat. A blue bolt slices into the room from the transwall. Han glances up and sees 2 stormtroopers using their blasters to open a passage in the unbreakable window. Chewbacca bellows and points at the door. 2 more troopers stand in the doorway, sweeping the back corner with sizzling energy bolts. Han still does not see Sodara. He scrambles toward the stockroom to help Leia. In the same instant, Leia knocks Alfreda's feet from beneath her and both females tumble to the ground. Leia rolls away from Alfreda only to be caught by the choking leash. Alfreda aims at Han with her blaster hand and pulls on Leia's leash with the other. Although the princess cannot breathe, she continues to struggle against Alfreda's death hold. Han sights his blaster pistol on Alfreda's chest, but he does not yet fire. If he pulls the trigger, he stands a fair chance of hitting Leia instead of Alfreda. But if he does not, Alfreda might choke Leia to death. If Han holds his fire, turn to 129. If Han fires, turn to 127. We have to fire, right? Like, it's not even a choice. We gotta fire. I need a drink of water. Jeez. 127. Oh, come on. Han fires his blaster bolt, penetrates Alfreda's armor, and the bounty hunter drops the leash. Han yells triumphantly. Alfreda somehow finds the strength to fire again, nearly hitting Han. He drops to the floor and rolls, then comes up and fires once. The shot goes high, but Leia has crawled to safety. Alfreda's gun flares again, sending a dozen shots streaking at Han's head. He pulls his trigger just as rapidly. For the next second, his world becomes a grid of colored death. Alfreda's red blaster bolts sizzle from her weapon in a fan-shaped pattern. His own blue energy bolts cross hers in mid-flight, burning diamond-shaped blocks into the air. At length, the red bolts cease. He holds his fire. Alfreda lies motionless. Blue-green streaks of static electricity dance across her motionless armor. Leia steps from behind the bar and pushes the suit over with her foot. "That's it," she says. Han guesses from the sound of things that the fight on the other side of the bar is nearly ended. Only an occasional pot shot of the shuffle of stormtrooper armor indicates that Sodara's men flush out the last of Alfreda's goons. Turn to section 138. Ah, yeah, suckers! I mean, I get it. I wouldn't mind putting Leia on a leash. Han removes Alfreda's helmet. He wants to see the bounty hunter whom he has chased across the galaxy. He finds a Togorian female as dainty and petite as any of her race. Her slit pupils are set in emerald eyes, now still and lifeless, though Han cannot picture the eyes as anything but cold and cruel in life. A dozen carefully clipped whiskers grow beneath a small, fine-featured nose. Her mouth hangs open to reveal a predatory set of snowy white fangs. An immense head of flame-red hair frames her prominent cheekbones. Leia stands beside Han. "Doesn't look like a killer, does she?" Han drops the helmet. "I'm beginning to distrust appearances altogether," he says. "Why is that?" Leia asks. Han studies her carefully. He does not want to tell her the full story. Not yet, anyway. "I don't know. Just a feeling, I guess." He steps behind her and unbinds her hands. "I know what you mean," Leia answers. "I wasn't sure you'd come after me. Thanks for all you did." "I couldn't leave you in Alfreda's hands. It was my fault." Han pauses. "I must have known that all along." She turns to face him. "You had a doubt?" Han knows better than to admit the truth. "I came, but I'm not sure why. Sometimes I think I have a special feeling for you, Leia." Leia's eyes betray her surprise. They're also a hint of something else, something she may be afraid to admit. "That's a very nice thing to say, even if I don't always say it, Han. I think you're a..." She struggles to finish the sentence. "A what?" Han asks eagerly. "Captain Solo, are you..." The Imperial commander questions, and the magic of the moment is lost. Han glares at Sodara for interrupting, but when he turns back, Leia is all business, and all princess once more. What had she been about to say? "It's finished, then," the Imperial says. He leads the way back into the cantina, where Chewie and the stormtroopers are warily eyeing each other. "The chronometer?" Han looks towards Sodara's men. They're not prepared for this fight, even if the enemy consists of only a man, a woman, and a Wookiee. Nevertheless, he knows it will be safer if they are not near. Why don't we just go back to the Falcon?" Han says cautiously. "Just you and us." Sodara smiles. "Yes, why not? But I insist on equal numbers." He motions to two men, then leads the way into the dry heat of Mos Eisley's dusty streets. Leia and Chewbacca follow Han. Halfway into the spaceport, Han fingers the chronometer. "Now your weapons." "You first," Sodara says. "I keep my pistol," Han says. "Deactivate your bowcaster, Chewbacca." "Very well." Sodara reluctantly agrees. "And I will keep my sidearm." They will do us no good holstered. Sodara's men toss their blaster rifles away. We are now evenly matched, he says. None of us is in condition to wrestle. The agreement? When we get to the berth. Sodara scowls, but he nods. They resume walking. Agreement? Leia demands. I'm sorry, Princess. Sodara demands. The terms of the agreement prohibit disclosure of its terms, as Captain Solo and I are both men of honor. Leia snorts. This must remain between us. Thanks, Han whispers. If Leia ever finds out, she'll never admit whatever it was she'd have been about to say in that lull after Alfreda's defeat. It will go as hard on me if anyone discovers our arrangement, Sodara admits. Outside the berth, Han deactivates the lock explosive, then turns the chronometer over to Sodara. Leia watches with interest. Turn to 126. Sodara steps away cautiously. Something in his manner worries Han. The Imperial officer's hand drops to his utility belt. Han nudges Leia and whispers, Go to the Falcon, quick! Leia moves to follow Han's instructions. Sodara withdraws Han's comlink. The Corellian winces. Sodara has set up an ambush, and Han himself gave him the comlink to do it. He has to act fast. He can jump the captain and attempt to keep him from activating the comlink. Unfortunately, with 2 stormtroopers in full armor to back him up, Sodara will probably win the fight. Or Han can draw his blaster pistol, give him an advantage over the 3 Imperials. So, what do we do? If Han jumps Sodara, turn to 154. If he draws his blaster pistol, turn to 155. I say blaster pistol. Like, you think jump him? I don't know if he's going to win that fight. And it's Han. I'm going to do blaster pistol. Yeah, I think that's kind of his style. As Han draws... Ooh, we get in the end. As Han draws Sodara, drops the comlink and reaches for his own blaster. 8 energy bolts flash between the two in less than a second. An instant later, Sodara lies on the ground grievously wounded. It happens that fast. Draw, fire, and the Imperial drops. The inactivated comlink lies at Sodara's feet. Han gasps for breath, and his body aches, but he's too numbed by the swiftness of the battle to worry about wounds yet. Chewbacca has wrestled the other 2 stormtroopers to the ground. As Han has a blaster pistol and they don't, the stormtroopers stop struggling. Leia has disappeared into the launch station. Why? Han gasps. You are not as good a judge of character as you believe, Captain Solo, Sodara whispers. A weak smile crosses his lips. I used your comlink to locate another Imperial squad. He shrugs. We are enemies. Nothing can change that. Leia sticks her head out of the berth entrance. Get moving, Solo! There are stormtroopers in here, and they're getting impatient. Han nods and takes the comlink. See to your captain, he orders the stormtroopers Chewie's got. What about our cargo? Asks one. Han points at his chronometer, which Sodara still grasps in his weak hand. He holds the trigger. It'll be safe unless you follow us. Agreed, the trooper says. Sure, Han replies sarcastically. Han and Chewbacca limp into the launch station. Several stormtroopers hide around the fringes of the berth. They make no move to stop the pair, though they clearly wonder if they are doing the correct thing. As Han boards the Falcon, a call comes over his comlink. Captain Sodara, they're boarding the craft now. What are your orders? Han holds his comlink to his mouth. Do nothing, he mumbles, hoping he sounds at least a little like the Imperial officer. Nothing, comes the reply. Then a moment later, Hey, you're not Captain Sodara! Han deactivates the comlink. Sorry. He closes the entry ramp, then turns to Chewbacca. Drop the cargo. We don't want them triggering the bomb. He reaches for the cockpit, Leia close behind. By the time he slips into the pilot's seat, the stormtroopers are attacking the Falcon with blaster rifles. 2 pairs of Imperials are setting up heavier weapons. Han activates the auto blaster cannon and targets on the heavy weapons crews. The Imperials abruptly stop firing. Han knows that Chewbacca has lowered Vader's crate. He moves to the center of the launch station and activates the repulsor field drive. A moment later, they escape Tatooine's atmosphere. Though the princess slumps back into her seat with an abrupt lessening of tension, her expression is alert. A bomb? That stormtroopers wouldn't fire at, but might trigger? The pilot busies himself with his instruments. He remembers the last moment after Alfreda's defeat, but Leia is in complete control again. He can almost feel her eyes drilling into the back of his skull, but the explosion he is braced for never comes. Instead, Leia measures Leia's measured tones state, "I don't think I'll ever want to know what was in that crate." Her response is so unexpected, Han twists to see if the cool depths twist to see if it's a bluff, and their gazes lock. Challenge dwells in the cool depths of Leia's eyes. He's reminded of Alfreda's death again. Will he ever know what she's been about to say? He grins to himself. Sure he will. It just takes a plan. The Corellian smiles. Good. We'll finally found something to agree on. The end. Oh, I wonder what the other endings were like. That was cool. That was fun. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in, both live and chat or after the fact. We invite you to subscribe to this channel and click the bell to get notified about our next session. You can now join the Infernal Brotherhood through YouTube memberships and pick some of our custom designed Star Wars apparel by following the link in the description. Until the Infernal Brotherhood convenes again, may the Force be with you.